All right. Thank you for attending our Worldwide Slot Car Chat number 14. So I am your host, Greg Gaub, also known as Mr. Flippant on the forums. 10 years plus, slot cars, analog, digital, yada, yada, yada. Watch previous episodes if you want longer intros. So everybody just say hi and introduce yourself, and then we'll get to talking about stuff. And maybe, I don't know, Kevin, have you been on here before? I forget. Oh, with camera. Now you have a camera. That's what it is.
Hiya. Can you hear me?
I can. Do you want to do a full intro?
Yeah, why not?
All right. Well, let me do quick ones for everybody else, and then we'll have you tell your life story.
Okay. Well, I'm Kevin on all the forums.
Kevin with an A.
Yes.
All right. Left, you want to go ahead and say hi?
Hi.
There we go. And John?
Hello.
All right. Mr. Modifier, Richard.
Hello. How are you?
Hello, Mike. No. Alan, go ahead. Say hi.
Hi there.
Hey, Alan Schwartz, Ikuri Martini. All right, Kevin, tell us all about Kevin.
Right. I started racing model cars properly in late 70s, 1978, when Tamiya brought out the Rough Rider. So this is RC. I was into my RC cars. But right up until 2015, I'd met a couple of the lads who were in the local slot car club back in the early 70s. And one day in 2015, I decided to go down and meet the guys, and just with a view of maybe joining the two clubs together in the same building. And anyway, I never went back. I absolutely love it. And I started from nothing, but my intention was, I'm not just here just to make numbers up. I want to be with, be able to drive like you other good guys. And I love it. I love everything about it, making my own stuff, modifying cars. Recently got into 3D printing, and it's just taken over my life, really. I absolutely love it. And I'm on the forums all over the place just to keep up with what's going on, really. And well, you've probably seen this. It's a Studebaker. I made it wider in Carrera, but that's on one of my chassis as well.
Nice. That's what I was just about to ask.
Yeah. But I do all sorts of stuff. So this was for a fly BMW, and that's another chassis. But this one's got a built-in flexi pod, which it doesn't really work, but it was an experiment. Unfortunately, one of the guys that I first met all those years ago in the 70s, Mike Dove, he died last Wednesday, which I didn't believe the message that came across to the group chat that we've got up. I had to read it about 6 times. And it just put a lot of things into perspective, really. We've got to enjoy this hobby while we can.
Got to enjoy life while we can. You never know.
This is life.
This is life, exactly. This is the 100% of life. Yeah, I think all of us are losing friends more often than we would want. That's for damn sure.
Yeah, to paraphrase Spinal Tap, a little too much perspective.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much for joining us, Kevin, and for sharing your story. And I'm sure we'll be getting more information out of you later on. It looks like everybody with a camera has said hi. Ray, do you want to say hi? Okay, maybe later. So I don't have a whole lot of subject matter. We kind of seem to have gotten the answer we were looking for regarding the routed slot car track by a CNC manufacturer. Slothead was having that done. And there were some erroneous cuts on the back of the board that was meant to be a banked turn. And we got Luff's perspective on that. He suggested that it should probably just be recut. But I think Slothead's going to go ahead and try to brace it underneath and see what happens. Worst case, he has to go get it recut. Did you have anything else you wanted to toss in on that subject, Luff?
Not really. I've tried patching stuff and it just doesn't work. When you're trying to pull a bank like that, you want it even, right? So when you brace it, it just deforms the whole thing.
Yeah.
And once that stuff starts to split, it's done.
Well, we had luck and hope he doesn't have to make that long drive and get another piece of wood cut, but looks like that might be something he has to plan for.
Well, if it's done on a CNC, the guy will still have the file.
Oh yeah, it's not a matter of how easy it is for the CNC guy. It's a long drive for him.
Oh, okay.
He's got to bring the wood and everything. So
I didn't know. He could always buy a routing kit.
exactly. I don't know what's up with the CNC stuff.
I don't think it's necessary. I think it's just more work.
Well, I'm sure we'll find out what happened regarding that in the future. Richard, you had a show and tell you wanted to do. I'm going to go ahead and highlight you and let you take it away.
All right, okay, thank you. Some of you guys will have seen this before, but I'm guessing, Kevin, you may not have. And as you've got an interest in 3D printer, this is my first attempt at printing 3D, which is a rat roll, the design for which came out of my head. And the background's messing about, isn't it? How do I switch my background off? Tech support, how do I switch my background off?
You got to click where you turned it on.
Oh, yeah, there we are. That's better. Right. Yeah, so that sort of came out of my head. The engine block is actually hollow, which is the right size to fit a Scalextric SSD digital chip.
It's that 30 second.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's yeah. And the next to come out of my head was the good old milk float.
I've seen that a few weeks ago. Yeah.
Yeah. So to break the tradition, I decided to actually copy somebody else's design. So I don't know whether you recognize these inserts that I printed. Do they look familiar?
No.
How about if they're connected to?
Oh.
Oh yeah, you're saying you were going to do that one.
Yeah. There we are. 1/32 scale. Printed the actual wheels in black, so it makes the tyres look bigger. The tyres are actually the same tyres that are on a Scalextric F430. The actual rims are black to make the tyre appear thicker, and the inserts were then sprayed silver and inserted. The actual wheels, I printed them on 100% infill, and actually there's two little 2mm diameter holes through for grub screws to secure them onto the rear axle. The narrows are the fronts are a little narrower, and the beast is not finished yet, but it's currently in a base coat to try and get it a little bit smoother. But there it is.
Wow, that looks spot on.
How long did that take to print, Richard?
In total, all the components take about 10 or 11 hours to print. But the actual beast itself, the roof is a separate item there, which basically has got some recesses to hold the arms, so they come out. So the hooks and arms are printed as in halves and actually stuck together with a ridge, so they look like they're plastic moldings. So I've tried to make it look like a scaled up, pressing. Then there's the rear deck. The rear deck is separate because it was a separate colour and it would have been hard to mask. So the rear deck is one piece, and then the cabin, which had a smooth deck behind it, is in a second piece. And there's a little post to mount onto the chassis, and the chassis is the same as the chassis that I had on my milk float. It's just 4mm longer, and so the front has actually got height adjustable. So again, in the axles, oval-shaped holes with 2mm holes top and bottom, so you can put grub screws in to adjust the height of the front axle. And it's done for a standard S-Can Mabuchi. And I managed to, somebody put a tutorial on Slot Forum for DAS, how to make figures. So I had a crack at that, and that's hellish difficult, but I actually managed to print myself a driver. So, yeah, I'm going to need to work on him. He's a little bit oversized, so I'm going to have to scale him down. He's about 7 foot tall, so I'm going to have to print him a little bit smaller. But yeah, it was good fun. But yeah, I actually found the milk float was really difficult to build from scratch, because I actually tried to build the shapes individually, and then I had a bit of inspiration from Michelangelo. Was it Leonardo da Vinci? I can't remember, one of them. Who was it that did David? Statue of David. Michelangelo. So what I did, instead of trying to build the Tojo up from scratch, I basically did what Michelangelo said. If David was always in there, I just took away the bits that weren't David. So what I did was I drew the outside profile of this in Corel Draw and extruded it, then used it to slice a block in one direction. I drew the profile from the other and sliced it in the other direction. And once I had my shaped block, I was then able to carve the inside by doing a smaller profile, zipping through the middle, and then just rounded the edges. So it actually took me about half of the time to do it that it took me to do the milk floats.
I've used Inkscape for doing that.
No, I use Corel Draw for my 2D, and then I use FreeCAD. And I slice it with Cura. So yeah, FreeCAD is really good for angular shapes. It's great for chassis, which is where I started. But then when you want compound curves, it's actually easier to draw something. I've been using Corel Draw for about 20 odd years. So it's much easier to draw a shape there and extrude it and then just control it within FreeCAD afterwards. But yeah, probably took me about 30 hours to do the milk float, and it probably took me about 12 to 15 hours to do the model of the Tojo. And the reason I picked this is it was one of my favourite cars from when I was a kid. But you look at the front screen, it's actually a flat plane that's just got two folds in it. So actually, I've got this PETG sheet that you can buy for. It works out about less than $1 for a sheet of A4. And you can actually, you can form it with heat, but I found the easiest thing to form it is just to clamp your fold line in a vise around a small diameter brass tube, and literally just pull it down by hand and just keep going until you get the right amount of bend, and it forms without shattering. And you don't get, if you try to use heat, you sometimes get ripples in the flat surfaces. So the only distortion's on the actual bend, but the flat surfaces remain flat. So I should be able to make myself a little jig and knock the windscreen out in one piece quite easily.
And what do you print with? PLA, PETG?
Yeah, this is just PLA.
Right.
But I find it's just easier to control. It's right next to my desk. So I don't want the fumes from ABS. Yeah, I did buy some ABS and some TPU, but I've never got around to using it yet. I've just stuck with the PLA. But the quality is worth paying an extra couple of pounds for a roll of PLA, because you can get some stuff that's really dire. But the premium stuff does actually print better. But yeah, so that's my show and tell. All I've got to do now is wait for some warm weather to put my top coats on.
A whole new hobby, isn't it, printing?
Yes, but yeah, and I think you can get carried away. So what I've done is I've always had a slot car project in mind for the printer. So it's very much a case of using the printer to print things for my slot car hobby, rather than printing becoming a hobby. But yes, you could get hugely lost in 3D printing world.
To be
I've
honest,
done one or two little things like a stand. You know, I've done the usual stand for the iPhone and the bigger one for the iPad and so on. But no, you can get distracted. But I've kept it firmly focused on slot cars, because that's still where my interests mainly lie.
yeah, I bought mine early January, and it was still in its box in March.
Right.
I was loath to open the box, and because I knew that it could take over if I'm not careful.
Yeah.
But being on furlough. How you doing, Sean?
All right, Kev.
We spoke a couple of days ago, didn't we?
Yeah, on the phone.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
this 3D printing thing, it's like you said, you've got to be careful, and just keep focused on your hobby.
Yeah.
That's basically what I tell people who are asking about 3D printing, is that you should consider the printing itself another hobby. Even if you don't make it your main hobby, it's gonna be a hobby. It's not a go to the department store, buy a printer, and come home and hit print yet. Maybe in a few years, but you're gonna be, you know, even if you get like an Ender 3, which is very little assembly needed, or a kit that you build, you know, every screw you turn, you're going to be doing something to get it going.
Yeah.
Even if you buy a completely assembled one, like some of the higher priced ones, or like my Prusa you can get as a kit or assembled, you're still going to be making sure that the first layer is right, and, you know, getting just that first print going, and then not doing what I did and being so cocky that the first print worked, that everything will work from then on, and then having catastrophic things happen because you think your printer is awesome and cannot go wrong. And then you learn how to fix it when things go wrong.
I found that when I sort of stuck with slot cars far longer. I've always collected hobbies as I've gone through my life. But when I came to slot cars probably 6-7 years ago, it seemed to coalesce all of my different hobby skills together into one place. And I think the 3D printing for me is just another dimension that focuses in on the slot cars, because I've always loved making stuff. And I guess I would be scratch building and buying bits. If I wasn't shaping it and printing it on 3D printer, I'd be buying bits and pieces and just making it anyway. But yeah, I think you know, the modeling skills, the competitive edge to it, it's all sort of coalesced and has stuck on the slot, because usually my hobbies would last about 2 or 3 years before they got discarded for the next one. But
Well, I have to say, as someone sort of tempted to get into 3D printing, if model kits are marijuana, 3D printing's heroin.
Yeah.
The model kits are your gateway to 3D printing.
Yep.
I mean, that's one of the things that I love about the slot car hobby just as a whole, is that there are so many facets that you can get into all of them and have it be this all-encompassing hobby that just you take bits and pieces that you know, fill all the little holes in your heart or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Or you can be the guy who the only thing you need out of it is designing a model. You know, you don't even print them, you just send them somewhere else to print. Or you can be the guy who just builds a model from scratch, or the guy who races, or the guy who landscapes, or the guy who does rocket tracks, or, you know, all these different things. And like you said, the 3D printing is a nice, another little niche aspect of the hobby. And that's where 3D printing is cool just in general, because it can become that niche aspect to so many hobbies that it can pretty much fit into anybody's, you know, corner somewhere.
Yeah. I think for me, the 3D printing allows me to do things that I couldn't have done before, allows me to make things that weren't readily available. Like, what, you know, I couldn't have got the milk flakes any other way, I guess. And, you know, the little things that I've made, the rat rods, would just say, wouldn't it be nice to have a rat rod? I'll tell you what, I'll make one. Yeah, and you know, it is, you know, it's great fun. I've learned a lot of stuff from looking at what other people have been doing as well. But I quite like the your flex chassis, Kevin. I think it's probably needs a bit of work. It's just getting the thicknesses right and using the right material, isn't it?
They do work, but to be honest, a slotted pod works better. What I found with the flexi chassis, as you're going into a corner, because it is a spring, it stores the energy. It tries to return.
Yeah.
So it does wallow a little bit. And it was just an experiment. But ultimately, I think a floating slotted pod, it gives me a better lap time.
Yeah. Well, somebody else did a chassis, didn't they, with a long arm with the guide on it that allows you to sort of slide and go around the corners, not actually directly above the slot.
Pip slot.
Pip slot. It's only built a pip slot into an actual chassis, didn't they? It looks quite entertaining.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pip slot did both the guide that you put on a chassis, and then they did chassis with the integrated swing arm thing on Shapeways. And then there's JS Chassis Design that has their kind of integrated, sprung pod kind of thing. Those are pretty ingenious. And that's what I like. Like you said, where 3D printing shines is not being able to make a thing that exists. It's being able to make things that don't exist or that can't exist because the volume would never be enough to do a fully manufactured item.
Short change is a good example of that, the short change guide, but I don't print that myself because it needs to be nylon because of the strength, the amount of stress you're putting on a guide. But the fact that I could design it and then have it printed by Shapeways, there's no way I could. I inquired into having an injection mold made, and it was something like 6 to 10,000 pounds injection mold made just for the guides, and it would have been a unit cost of about a penny each. But I'd have had to sell 100,000 to break even, which was never going to happen. But with the Sure Change guide, I could have them printed in batches of 100, a cost of about $100, and sell that batch on for about $300 or $400. So most of my slot car early hobby was paid for by the Sure Change guide. So I'd only have to hold £100 worth of stock. Rather than invest £7,000 or £8,000 in an injection mold that may never get used more than a few times,
or have boxes and boxes of guide blades that take years and years to sell through.
Yeah, and in fact, because when I made it the standard Scalextric guide depth, and when they changed the depth of the guide and they added a millimeter to the guide depth a few years ago, I simply amended the CAD file, and the next lot were printed deeper. I'd have had to had a very expensive modification made to an injection mold if I'd done that. It just would never have happened. People knock the big manufacturers, but the amount of money that that Carrera and Scalextric have to pay for a mold makes it it's a pretty risky business to be in, really. Looking at the volumes that they can sell, no wonder they get so many reliveries because of the economics of producing something in a mold. Now, I was amazed they brought out the Only Fools and Horses Reliant Regal, because they're only going to get possibly 2, maybe 3 liveries if they do a fantasy one out of it. Whereas the Sierra, they are probably their 6th, their 7th version. They'll probably do more over the next few years. So yeah, it's quite a challenge to find the right thing to make when you're going for mass manufacture. And that's the beauty with 3D. I may only ever make 3 milk floats, but they only cost me, a few dollars each in materials.
I forget. Did you post those online somewhere?
They're on Slot Forum. The build thread is on Slot Forum, and I think they're going to be featured in the National Slot Car Collectors magazine this month, I think.
I mean, as far as downloading the files, if I wanted to make a milk float.
Oh, I haven't put the files up. I'm in 2 minds what to do about that. I'm in 2 minds because it needs a lot of work. I need to refine the files because it needs a lot of work to make them fit. I need to shave a 0.5 millimeter off here and a 0.5 millimeter off there. And if somebody wanted to print it and just stick it together, there's a lot of work to get it smooth and get it to fit. So yeah, it needs a bit of work before I put it out there, I think.
Well, to be fair, even if your model is perfect, because 3D printing is not yet perfect, they're going to have to make some modifications to their printed parts to get them to all fit together nicely anyways, most likely.
I was actually going to ask, there's no guarantee, for example, that your file will work exactly on someone else's printer, right? I guess. Is that a correct assumption?
No.
The code,
what you should assume is that if your printer is properly calibrated such that it is printing things to the size that the file is provided in, like if you print something that's 20 millimeters and it comes out as 20.5 millimeters, you need to do some fixing. But if you print something that's 20 millimeters and it comes out at 20 millimeters in all the appropriate directions, then you're good to go and you should be able to just print whatever. I've found with my printer, I really didn't have to do a whole lot other than learn how to work a 3D printer. But now I can just stick any old model on there and it comes out usually pretty much fantastic and properly proportioned and sized and everything.
The files don't come ready for you to print, John. What you get, you go back a step. You get a file that has to go through a thing called a slicer, which prepares it for your particular printer. So you take a step back. It's basically you're back to the engineering drawings that then your slicer will interpret for your printer and then set it up for your print settings. If you've got a file that you think you can stick straight in a printer and print, then that won't work. But it's one step back. So long as you've got a slicer, then you can prepare, providing the STL has been put together properly. If it was designed for 3D printing, some of these shapes that you can buy aren't properly joined and they don't print. But that's a whole other thing. But yeah, if you get something off of Thingiverse that's designed a slot car chassis, you still have to run it through your slicer to prepare it for your printer. But it doesn't take long. It's literally a couple of minutes.
Okay, so is it kind of like in the old days when you had a personal computer printer where you'd have to sort of zero it to?
Exactly that. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Those are the old.
The materials are all different as well.
Sorry?
The materials are all different as well, even if it's the same compound as such.
Yeah, you'll find that if you get the exact same printer with the exact same filament, same color, same type, and everything as Joe Schmo, and he runs it through his printer and it comes out great, and you run it through your printer, it doesn't come out great. There's like a dozen things that could be the result of. However, to Richard's point, you can in fact download printable files. They're usually G-code files, but you have to make sure that what you're downloading is appropriate for whatever printer you have. For example, Prusa now has their own file sharing website at prusaprinters.org, and they encourage people to post G-code files so that people don't have to download the thing and slice it and do all the settings and set up supports and everything. You can just say, here's the model file if you want to do it yourself, but here's a G-code file that has been sliced for a Prusa i3 Mark III's, running PLA filament, with a 0.4 millimeter nozzle and stuff, to make sure that you are running his code on a more or less identical printer. That will probably work okay. But all of those things, any of those things being different brand of filament, different type of filament, different nozzle size, different model printer. Like if you've upgraded your extruder to a better extruder on your printer than what the G-code is made for, then things probably won't work. So most people download the model file, STL or OBJ or whatever the model file is that your slicer can take, and then you drop it in your slicer and set your settings how you like, and then hit slice, and then you send that to your printer to actually print. Did that answer your question? Everything? Okay. Anybody else want to talk about 3D printing? I can go all day with 3D printing. Thank you for sharing your update, Richard. We certainly look forward to updates on the tow truck. What was that called?
Tojo, for some reason. I don't know, and spelled T-O-E, not T-O-W. So heaven knows what they were thinking back in the 70s. They must have been smoking something maybe. But yeah, it's... I'll be painting it and putting it. It'll probably be a couple of weeks before it's finished to my satisfaction, but it'll be going on Slot Forum at some point.
Excellent. That was made by Matchbox, wasn't it?
Yes, it's a Matchbox. Matchbox Lesney, 1972. This one they made it. 72 and 1974.
Yeah, I believe I had one as well.
Yeah, I had to buy this off eBay. My mother threw all my toy cars away years ago.
Yeah,
I had to buy this on eBay, and it's missing a hook. But it basically, I just needed to measure it to draw the thing accurately.
Yeah.
Fortunately, it was 1/60 full scale, so the maths was really easy.
Well, kudos to your mother, because little did she know that she just raised the value of everyone else's toys.
Yeah.
By that much. Yep, I'm sure we've all fallen prey to parents getting rid of toys, and I'm a toy collector of Transformers toys is my plastic crack, other than slot cars, of course. And so as my kids grew up, we didn't throw away any toys. We made them choose which toys got gotten rid of. And so we would say, okay, you have too many toys, pick the ones to get rid of. Yeah, that doesn't work. Oh, I love this toy. Oh, I love this toy, but you haven't played with it in a year. Yeah.
The other rule of thumb too is that if it goes up a vacuum cleaner hose, it's worth money.
Of course. Oh no, I needed that piece. Yeah, so now we have big boxes, and as adults, we make them come back and say, okay, what do you want to keep out of these boxes? The rest is going to Goodwill. They make better decisions as adults.
You sure?
Anyways, does anybody have any other show and tell they want to go through, or any other questions about 3D printing? I have to dig in my dwindling pile of subject matter.
Actually, I have a quick question.
Yay!
So far as 3D printers go, I have assiduously avoided becoming involved, and I intend to keep it that way. I am, however, rather heavily involved at the moment in CNC machining. I'm setting up a CNC milling machine. A, because I've always wanted to do it. B, it is one of my prejudices that a way to avoid cognitive decline as one ages is to continue to challenge the mind. And bringing myself up to speed in CAD and CAM and all of the stuff that goes into it is certainly challenging.
I've always been of the mindset that if somebody else can do it, then I can.
Right. The typical of CNC machining and things like the Mach 3 program, which is what drives my milling machine, is you have the capability to set in, to account for offsets in the lead screws and so on and so forth that drive the head back and forth, or in the case of this, my CNC mill, the table. I would guess that you would have a similar problem in the certainly the XY axis of a 3D printer. Are there programming tricks to account for inaccuracies, slop, or some effectively hysteresis in the lead screws?
I don't think it's so much of an issue because it's almost like a worm drive. So it's very tight tolerances. Plus the fact you haven't got the mass that you're moving around with the CNC machine. So the masses involved are much lighter with a 3D machine. And in fact, like a CNC machine, the bed moves in one axis and the head moves through the other.
Okay.
If you look at the pitch of the screw is a very fine thread pitch, and the motors are very well controlled. And from what I can see, there's even a belt drive, and you'd think there'd be some slop, but it seems to be fairly consistent. You can vary the speed at which you print. So if you're printing something with that's very delicate, then you could get offsets. You can actually slow the thing down so you don't get so much of a bounce.
Okay, it's just a matter of curiosity. A story in parallel to the lost toys or discarded toys. My father was a physician in a small town in New York State, and the town was also the home of a company called Western Printing. Western Printing in the US printed essentially all of the comic books that were printed in the 1940s. One of his patients came from Western Printing, and as a result, I had copies of practically every comic book printed from, let's say, 1942 to probably about 1950. It was quite a stack.
Something tells me this isn't going to end well.
It was quite a stack in a closet that was left after I went off to college and graduate school and so forth. And as you might predict, a cleaning fit overtook my mother one day, and a veritable fortune in collectible comic books went into the bin.
Ouch.
Well, she made everybody else's more valuable. So welcome to those people. That's gotta hurt. I wanted to add to the 3D printing question that you had, and Richard was talking about the lead screws. Those are generally for the Z-axis, which moves much more finely, well, differently. It needs to not, when the motor's let go, it needs to not, move down, basically. And my printer uses tooth belts for both the X motion of the head and the Y motion of the print bed. Generally speaking, you're going to have the lead screws for the bed moving up and down, or the head moving up and down, depending on what kind of printer, and then belts for the X and Y axis, whether it's, depending on, what kind of printer it is. And all the motors, of course, are stepper motors, which can do, they have like 9-degree pitch or 18-degree pitch, and then they can do partial steps and everything. So they're very precise. You want your printer to have the belt tension to be fairly tight. The belt should make a tone when you pluck it, like a bass guitar, to remove any kind of slop. So if your belts and your pulleys and everything are properly set up, then, and your motors are locked, so they're not allowing things to just move freely, then there is no slop pretty much anywhere, unless you put a lot of force on it, and that force is not being applied during printing. Yeah, John?
So what type of maintenance is required to make sure that everything is to spec?
Keeping an eye on it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It's a tooth belt, so there's virtually no chance of slippage. If you've got slippage on the tooth belt, then something is seriously wrong.
Jammed.
Yeah.
Okay, but as far as wear and tear on the belt, like, do you just watch for fraying, or?
Yeah. You'll notice it. You'll print one day. You'll print something, and halfway up the print, it seems to have shifted itself a few millimeters in one direction. That's when you know it's time to replace the belt, because the teeth are slipping.
Right, because like
getting fraying,
I was thinking of like an internal combustion engine that uses like a rubber belt for timing. I mean, you have to periodically change them because of stretch.
Yeah.
No.
But it's not
That's what the tension is for.
Yeah. Adjust the tension.
Okay.
Yeah, you don't want that much tension on it. You want enough tension that it's taut, but not going to cause overdue stress to the belt.
Right.
And they're usually fiberglass reinforced belts, so they don't stretch. And if your belts are being damaged even over a long period of time, then your printer needs to be looked at, because there should not be anything causing physical damage to those belts. So if something is causing physical damage, then there's another problem somewhere. My first printer has been printing pretty much 24/7, maybe 27, we'll say, or 26 anyways, for over 2 years. I've not had to replace anything at all on it. I've not had to do any maintenance whatsoever on it. The only thing that I did, and it wasn't even necessary, was drop a little oil on the smooth rods that the linear bearings roll on, and they're sealed bearings anyways, so that wasn't even necessary. They hadn't been showing any signs of problems or wear and tear. Some people might have an unlucky bearing that has a damaged ball in it or something that causes scratches on the smooth rod, and then you've got to replace the bearing and the rod and stuff. But that stuff is usually fairly easy to notice when you hear something is amiss with the printer as it's doing its thing, or you see any signs either in the prints themselves. You'll see anomalies, or you'll even see the scratch on the rod or the damage on the belt or whatever like that. As soon as you see those things, and you figure out why they're happening, and you fix the problem. But if everything is set up right and running smoothly, then no, nothing at all. You're good to go.
The best thing you can do is make sure you buy an authentic one, because the first one I bought off eBay. It wasn't the cheapest one around, but and it turned out it was some very cleverly marketed thing. So it looked like it was an authentic one, but it wasn't quite. And the amount of hassle I had having to level the bed, and bits were breaking and so on, I was ready to chuck it out the window. And eventually, actually, I bit the bullet. My wife said, "You're getting so much stress off this. Let's get rid of the damn thing." And I bought a genuine Ender 3 directly from Creality in China. and it cost me £180 instead of £150 on eBay, and it's been perfect. It was a real revelation. So the first one I bought went down to my local dump with some glee, but it took me, I was probably getting 1 out of 5 prints was working. I was getting really frustrated. With the Ender, I've had 1 print out of several hundred fail. And that's because I just didn't have the bed leveled properly at the start. Apart from that, it's been perfect. So I think you need to just buy carefully. You know, if it looks like a bargain, it probably isn't.
Your missus sounds like a keeper, Rich.
Yeah, when I got my,
because it was stopping me doing all the other jobs I promised her I'd do.
I got my,
or you're simply not insured.
Yeah, I'm not well enough insured anyway.
I got my first printer as a kit, and before the kit even arrived, and I told my wife that it was a kit, she's like, "Oh." And then when the kit arrived, and I laid out all the pieces on the dining room table, preparing to put it together, she's like, "Good luck with that. Have fun with that. I love you. Bye." I mean, in spite of all the confidence that I was given by other people, it came out just fine. And then I had my trials and tribulations, and now everything's fine.
I suppose that's a real way to learn, I guess. When you build the darn thing yourself, you really know how it works.
Yeah. What did you want to ask, Leo?
John's mention of the timing on internal combustion engines reminded me. I wondered if anybody has any tips on timing the vertical axis screw threads. If they get out of alignment, which mine did, how do you realign them? So one is driven by a stepper motor, and the other one basically is driven by a belt across the beam to the other side of the bed. And on mine's a Creality CR10, which the head is moved vertically on a beam between the 2 pillars. So how do you time how do you set them up so that they're both rotating at the same time, and therefore moving the head horizontally rather than squint?
I mean, that should be accomplished by the appropriate tooth count and everything of the belts and everything in use. The Prusa that I have has individual motors on each of the ends of the gantry that goes up and down. So it's got 2 Z motors that are controlled at the same time, but what it does, if things get off kilter, what it does is it racks it all the way up to the top until it hits the top, and then if it's off kilter, it'll go until it's straight, and then it'll come back down and do its bed leveling. I don't know how an Ender 3 works other than, or Ender or Creality CR10 or whatever.
Yeah.
Are there 2 sensors on your on both sides? Because if you auto home it, then it should actually keep winding it down until they both bottom. But if your belt has slipped, your belt has slipped. But on the A12 I had before, that had 2 separate. And as Greg says, it would when you auto home, it brings them along and puts them at ground zero. But they basically keep winding it down until it hit the sensor to tell it was there. But I don't know with the CR10 whether the belt drive is dumb or whether it will keep going until it hits a second sensor. But when you level your bed, you should be able to adjust the wrong side until you've got an even distance all the way across. And then, yeah, if it gets out, then the chances are that the belt is probably slipping.
Right. Sorry, I misspoke. There are actually separate motors at both sides. I just had a quick look there. So yeah, I was under the impression there's only 1 separate motor, but there are actually 2. So yes,
there'll be two sensors. So you need to home.
There's only 1 sensor.
Oh.
So the sensor's at one side.
You might need to manually do what the Prusa does automatically, and then just rack it all the way to the top so that it hits the top stops, and then bring it back down.
That sounds like a good idea.
You've got, just in general to our viewers, whatever printer you've got, there is a way to fix whatever problem you're having or to calibrate whatever thing needs calibrating. But it might be different from my printer or Richard's printer or Leo's printer. So your best bet is, first of all, go to the manufacturer's website and see what kind of help they offer. And then 2, go to a forum or a Facebook group that's specific to your manufacturer, if not specific to your printer, and say, hey, this is my thing, can anybody help? And chances are you're the 100th person to ask that same question, and hopefully not a bunch of a-holes on that group so that you get an answer rather than a bunch of back talk.
I've just done a quick Google, and there's 3 or 4 videos I can see now on getting your Z-axis play sorted out. So it could be there's stuff out there. There are 1 or 2 little forums that were really helpful for me at the start. That actually made me reach the decision to dump my first dumb printer and get a decent one. But yeah, there is stuff out there. You just, I guess, as with all search, you just got to find the right terms to search for.
And Richard, you said your first printer was an A12. You mean ANET?
An A12,
ANET A12. Yeah, ANET is not known to be a high quality printer.
Yeah, well, I didn't know at the time. It was cheap.
So you bought an Ender. So the ANET, basically, a lot of printer companies will call their printer a Prusa, based on the Cartesian design of a sliding printing bed, and then the X on a gantry, and
that's where I got caught.
And so a lot of them just say, you know, this is a Prusa printer, but it's actually an ANET A8 or A12 or an Ender 3 or whatever. So,
not knowing anything about the industry, that's where I got caught, because I thought I was buying a Prusa.
Yeah.
So that's why when I eventually went on the forums to find out, okay, guys, which is the simplest, most hassle-free printer to buy, I ended up with the Ender 3 because it seemed to be, it's not the highest quality print. It's not the best in everything, but it's a great all-rounder, and it seems to do what I want it to do quite well. So
yeah, it's from what I've seen with you guys doing all your awesome slot card things with Ender 3s and people printing figurines with Ender 3s. I recommend Ender 3s. You know, unless you got a bigger budget than that. I happen to have enough money to get a genuine Prusa, so I've got a genuine Prusa. I'm sure I would have had to go through a lot of the same things that I did just learning 3D printing in general. I mean, the Prusa didn't keep me from having to learn 3D printing. You know, I still had to go through some trials and tribulations to get to where I am now. So that extra money didn't help. What, Kevin?
Just on a point that John mentioned earlier about printing, there's different types of printing. What we're talking at the moment is FDM printing, which is a filament. I've recently been looking at resin printing, which doesn't use a filament at all. It uses an LCD screen to set a layer at a time, whereas a filament printer will do a layer, then a layer, then a layer. A resin printer will do a whole layer in one blast in maybe 2 seconds on some of the newer ones. So they're much, much quicker.
And is the resin in liquid form, or is it solid?
It's liquid. It's not very safe either. You don't want to get it on your skin. It can cause first-degree burns.
Yeah, it's just like any resin. The danger of any resin, it's a UV curable resin, and so you basically have a vat that you put your resin in, and then the build plate goes down into the vat, and then an LCD is blocking a UV light, so then it allows UV to go through whatever pixels it opens up and cures a very fine layer of resin, and then the build plate goes up and then back down 1 layer higher to let resin fill in that gap. Then it cures another layer and lets the resin fill in and cures another layer, and then it just kind of builds up as you go. So your thing is building upside down on this platform that's raising from the bottom.
Okay, so the resin must have a really long pot life then.
Oh yeah, it doesn't cure it cures in light, right? So when it's being stored, it's just in a light locking container, and I think it's got a shelf life. And once it starts to cure, then you've got to pretty much toss it, I guess. But I haven't ventured into resin printing, only just academically.
The quality is fantastic, and I think if you are making body shells with lots of very svelte curves on it, it would be perfect for that. But the chemicals are nasty. With PLA, you can sit it on your desk. But with the resin ones, you've got to have proper fume extraction, and you've got to handle it properly. Not only once it's cured, you have to wash it in other chemicals to remove the residue resin off the model before you clean it. You know, you can get machines which do it, but then the machines are about the same price as the printers as well. So much as I'd probably prefer to find somebody who's got a resin printing service and just put the odd print through them rather than acquire one for myself. I just don't like the idea of all those nasty chemicals for the volume of prints that I'd put through. You know, if I was a super enthusiast and was printing, you know, something constantly, then it probably would be worth it. But I'd probably need to build a separate shed just to house it in.
There is one main advantage with the resin, apart from the material, because of the way that it works. If you're doing, say, a wheel, and it would take, say, 20 minutes to do a wheel, if you filled the whole bed with 30 wheels, it would still take the same length of time.
Yeah.
Resins can be mixed, so you can get like a tough resin and pre-mix it with a flexible. You can create your own mixtures. You can get water washable ones, but the majority use IPA. But it is nasty stuff.
Yeah, there's pros and cons to pretty much every kind of 3D printing, consumer and commercial type of printing.
That sounds almost like a commercial application, I suppose.
Well, that's where stereolithography started. That's where the file name came from, was the resin printing.
Yeah. Just that, you know, the manufacturers suss that they can now, the technology price has come to a point where they can make it affordable to hobby users, and all of a sudden their market has grown hugely. But yeah, I mean, the quality is unparalleled. It is absolutely superb quality. But it's whether, you know, if you were into printing if you were printing hundreds of figures, it probably would be cost effective to get a resin printer to print all your figures on, because you want that detail.
Absolutely. I mean, you can get a resin printer for a couple of hundred, and you can get an FDM printer for a couple of hundred.
Yeah.
So like Richard was saying, if you're going to be doing a lot of figurines, or you need the high detail and can manage the toxicity of it, then yeah, the resin printing is hard to beat. I don't think it's beatable.
That's how it started back in the 90s with resin.
Yeah.
I worked at a company where we used to get 3D printed components before they made proper machine tools to make the blocks. And there was always, if I remember rightly, I'm sure they were made out of resin because they were very brittle. But the whole idea of them was to prove concept before you manufacture the tooling.
They used to use,
like Richard said, they
used to use lasers and mirrors. So it's quite a clunky way of doing it. It would go round, a bit like a filament printer.
Yeah, like I say, I remember back in the 90s when we used to use these components, and okay, they weren't brilliant, but they used to prove concept before you had the tooling made, which, like Richard said, is very expensive. I think the tooling then was about 10 grand per, for a mold.
Yeah.
So it cuts down on the price.
And they've gotten better since then. Yeah, I mean, all kinds has been around for, like you said, 30 plus years, and now it's the technology has gotten to enough companies that it's a competition thing, and now the price has gotten down, and those $200 resin printers are making stuff better than those commercial printers were doing 30 years ago.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of getting it and dealing with all the issues that you got to deal with. And Kevin was saying, you can mix. There's a lot of different types of UV curable resins that you can get. They're not all going to be brittle like just regular old thin resin.
Which honestly is very much like resin itself. When you're resin casting, you can get something called Task 2 that has the tensile strength of aluminum, and you can mill it and you can drill and tap it. That's what we use for our wheels. And then there's just the run-of-the-mill 300 stuff that you do bodies with.
Well, they're 3D printing bone joints, aren't they? Actually, in the theatres now, there are some medical stuff I've seen where they don't actually print the hip joint until they're doing the operation, and they do sonography to figure out exactly what they need, then it's printed in the theatre, and then inserted into the patient. It's just astonishing.
I can see the time in the future where you'll just get printed straight onto the end of your bone.
Yeah, quite possibly.
Well, actually, yeah, I know that's done for cataract patients, for example. They'll basically, scan your eye before removing the bad cornea tissue, send it off, have the lenses made, and away you go.
Yeah, they're doing it for when you get a bad road accident. You haven't got time to, it's not an anticipated thing. So if they're trying to rebuild somebody's jaw, instead of putting in pins and stuff like that, they're actually, they're removing the shards of bone and replacing it with a custom printed 3D replacement bone, and with presumably mesh on the end so that the real bone can grow into it. Yeah, it's amazing what they can do. The Germans are even printing houses with FDM concrete printers, aren't they? I think they're going out to Africa and printing, sort of 2-bedroom houses for something like $3,000 or $4,000.
Yeah, that's kind of the German scale of things, isn't it? We're doing cars, they're doing houses.
Yeah.
Yeah, Leo's glad that we switched from bones to houses. He didn't want to listen to that other stuff.
Yes, thank you.
All right, moving on. Does anybody else want to keep talking about 3D printing? Any other 3D printing related questions before I try to find something else to talk about? Anything else anybody wants to talk about?
Alan, what material are you using for your CNC machine?
Well, in the CNC machine, I work primarily in brass and aluminum.
Okay.
Do some steel. It's basically the only difference, one material to another, is the cutter that you use, the profile material of the cutter, and the traverse speed, how fast you can go. You can go a lot faster in aluminum than you can in steel. Brass is also fairly quick. Actually, brass is typically quicker than aluminum because brass does not tend to stick onto or gum up the cutter, which is something you have to be careful of.
Lubrication.
What kind of CNC are you working with? Are you building a CNC? Or are you getting a low-end CNC using somebody else's?
I've got a Petg machine that I picked up secondhand. It came with all the software, the stepper motors, and so on and so forth. I've got it mostly assembled. It needed some refurbishment. It was a nice machine. Instead of the typical simple Acme thread lead screws, it's got ball screws on it, which run to a much tighter tolerance. The machine will work at a level far beyond anything we need for slot cars. I'm still, I made a few cuts on it. What I need to do is understand better exactly what the relationship is between what I draw, what the machine translates, and what comes out the other end. So I'm working on simple things now. Of course, obviously with machining, you do not have the same freedom of interior cuts and the 3D buildup that you can get with printing. It's a good deal simpler, but I'm still, I'm a sort of a Neanderthal in this. I like the ironmongery.
What software do you use, Alan, for the CAD?
Sorry?
What CAD program do you use?
I use a couple of different CAD programs. I've got an old copy of TurboCAD, and then I use Mach 3 as the translator. That will output a G code to the machine. One of the things you have to be careful of in machining versus what I've heard, at least about the 3D printing, my machine uses stepper motors, not servos. And if you overload the machine, try to cut too fast or too deep, you can overload the stepper motor and it will skip steps. So things get distorted. Obviously, when you're dealing with a very light bed or light head, this is not as much of a concern.
Oh, it's a thing.
You know, this is not really an issue for me because it's not a production environment. I really don't care whether a part is done in 20 minutes or in 2 hours. The difficult thing about it is, like with all automation, which is supposed to free you up to do other things, it's awfully tempting to sit there and watch the machine do its work.
Oh yeah, I can still watch my 3D printers for hours. And
The first layer
crashing is what we call when a stepper motor skips a step. Is usually referred to, other than skip steps, as a crash, because usually it's caused by the print head crashing into usually the print. And there's a lot of things that can go amiss, causing your print to warp up. And when it's higher than the nozzle thinks it is, then the nozzle hits it and then either knocks the print off the bed and you end up with a pile of spaghetti afterwards, or it skips steps and then you have layer shift, and so your print is ruined from then on anyway. So
in CNC machining, it's a similar issue, but it is typically because the program has asked the machine to go beyond its limits of travel. So you've got micro switches and travel stops to avoid that.
You can get over the temptation to sit and watch it if you get a little GoPro or something like that that will take one still every 30 seconds and put it on your print bed, and then you can watch the whole 2-hour print in 30 seconds at the end. Just a thought.
Or what I do is I use old cell phones as live cameras, and I can peek in on my prints whenever I'm somewhere else. Or even right here. My printers are over there. Sometimes I'll just look at them from here. Well, I look forward to seeing your CNC explorations and creations, Alan. So I look forward to you showing those off. And showing off your CNC at some point if you want to.
Yeah, I will. I will try to rig up something to take a tour of that. I have just added something to the office armamentarium here that will assist that. I had some complaints from my daughter. We have been keeping in touch via FaceTime. And she made a complaint that it often seemed that what she was dealing with was a voice, a disembodied voice coming out of the shadows. So I picked up a gadget this week, which is an interesting little ring light, which I now have set up. You were probably seeing more of me than you've seen before. That may or may not be a good thing. But it's a clever little thing. It's a stand with a ring light on it. And it has the capacitor, a little clamp, which will hold a cell phone that one can, has some video capabilities. This has a number of amusing possibilities, including the ability to change the color temperature of the light.
That's cool. How much did the ring light cost?
About $30.
Oh, I'm gonna have to look into that. A nice ring light makes this kind of thing completely different, as we can see.
It came from Amazon. You can also adjust the amount of light, all on a little push button. Fair. As I say, whether or not seeing more of me is a good thing is could be a subject of discussion, but probably not worth having here.
All right. Does anybody else have anything they want to talk about? Questions they want to bring up?
I've got a quick question for you.
All right, Wayne.
We've just got a new 4-lane Carrera track set up that we're going to be starting racing on shortly. So that's quite interesting, from going with our cars mostly being set up for a board track. And we race magnets. So the board track had Magna braid. Now we're going to the Carrera. Tyres, what works? You've got more experience with Carrera, I think, most of you guys. Tyres, what types work? Most of us have got MJKs, which is the Aussie urethane job. They seem to work okay, but is there any other tyres that seem to work well on the Carrera? Just a quick one,
I mean,
if anyone.
my tire preferences tend to be the softer rubbers anyways, so I'm sure the MPKs will work pretty good. But you know, my go-to has tended towards being you know, NSR, you know, ultras or supers or whatever, and then of course slotted's comparable N18s and N22s, and then scale auto foam rubber. I mean, those three tire types hook up on pretty much anything you put them on. And you know, they hook up great on sport, and sport is as slippery as Carrera, so I expect that those tires will work great on Carrera as well.
Wayne, are you planning to paint your Carrera track at all?
I don't think he is, no.
Yeah, that'll make a difference too. But
yeah,
I think the bumpy plastic track will be probably more of an issue of grip. If you're used to going on a really smooth wooden track, then you'll have to change your setup. You'll probably have to make your chassis a lot looser. You know, if you've got motor pods, then give them a bit more float. If you can loosen the posts on the car, make the body float a little bit, that will make a difference. And because you can have, at speed, you can have a difference in elevation of maybe only 1 or 2 millimeters, but when you're at speed, that's enough to really unsettle the car. So if you've got a little bit of front play of your axle, if you can do it. But on tyres, we tend to try and use the same tyres across the board, because tyres are probably where you get your biggest advantage. And I guess the club where we race, we're not that serious about our racing. I'd rather have a close match than to have somebody running away because they spent a fortune on tyres. So we tend to use urethanes because you can't mess with them. Or if we use rubber, we tend to say use the stock rubber on the cars and just put a little bit of light oil on them. But yeah, most tyres work pretty well on plastic track. And if you've got magnets, I don't think it's going to make a huge amount of difference, to be honest. I think the urethanes you've got are probably absolutely fine.
Yeah, the front axle floats is a big deal on plastic, isn't it? So, you know, you want 2 or 3 mil up or downward. Not so much side to side, but you're up and down, you want about 2 or 3 mil. And lift them up a bit so they barely kiss in the plastic.
Yeah.
You know, you're not leaning on them like you do on wood.
And it's worth noting that Carrera track is stiff plastic, not flexible plastic like Sport and Ninco and, you know, classic, you know, SEX and Scalextric Classic. Carrera doesn't get as bumpy as those other softer plastics do. There are minor variations between old Carrera and new Carrera in the rail height and stuff. So if he's building this track out of a conglomeration of track that was, you know, purchased used and new and things, then he might have those differentials, and in which case the, you know, those, you know, loosened axles and things like that, and you know, various ways of suspending things for bumpy track are definitely going to be appropriate for those situations. If it's all brand new, relatively newly manufactured Carrera track, then it should all be pretty consistent, even at the joins, as long as it's all, you know, assembled nicely and not tweaked in some bizarre fashion.
No, it's a combo of brand new and some of it's 35 years old.
Okay.
He got given by a mate of his, and he's done a fabulous job on setting it up. It's quite smooth, actually. I was really surprised at how good it is. And he's had no conductivity issues. He's got apps in it. Done a great job, and he's still getting a few of the borders organised. But overall, it's looking good. We're really happy. And there's another guy who's also setting up a 4-lane Carrera as well. So we're going to have 2 to race on. Same surface, which will be actually good once we get all our cars reset and ready to roll. So
I guess what I would do, just to be sure, is to just go around the whole layout with your finger, and where you feel a difference between, you know, 2 pieces of track joined together, you know, then you'll know what I'm talking about. If you don't feel that, you know, anywhere on the track, then they're probably all equivalent and not really have that issue. So closest thing to wood track is going to be Carrera or now Polycar. It's pretty close to.
If you do have an issue with rail height variations, what you can do is use conductive copper tape, just to do a lead in and burnish it down with the back of a spoon, and that'll give you, it won't give you a perfectly smooth, but it'll help the transition. Otherwise you'll find that if there's a sharp edge, it'll start nibbling away at your braids.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I did on my Scaly Sport.
Yeah.
What to say of the WRP Rally Proxy? I've used the MGK tyres on my Carrera track quite a lot. The MGK are the standard handout tyres for the WRP championship. And so I've used those tyres on my Carrera track quite a lot. And I found them great. When they first arrived, I thought these are really working well with the Carrera surface. Unpainted and non-magnet. But yeah, they worked really good.
Yes, I had a car in that, so
yes. I hope it did well here.
I think it did all right on one of those Carrera tracks, actually.
Right, okay.
Well, what were you entered as, Wayne? What was your
Pepsi 62.
Oh, right, yeah.
Great name.
At the back.
Great name.
Wayne, how
Where
much?
did you come, Martin?
Sorry, say again?
Where did you come?
Well, I won it 1 year, didn't I? I might have mentioned that in Slot Forum once or 3,000 times.
How much did you pay John to ask that question?
Chris was going to ask me something.
The dark side, that's what it is. You see, he used the Force because he used to play with the Jedi on Scale Electric Digital, but he crossed to the dark side and went analog.
I'm back playing with Oxygen now. That's the future. You really got to embrace that. It's a fabulous system.
Wayne, it is one way, surefire guaranteed way of lengthening your track at no cost. You could chuck your magnets away.
Yes, I know. But trying to get these other guys to do that, oh, it's hard work.
How much downforce do they run, Wayne?
Varies. There's one of the other tracks there. They're running under 200.
Jesus, that's still a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot. Yeah.
As Richard mentioned, to be honest with you, with around 200 grams of downforce, you can run plywood tires. It really doesn't.
Pretty much, yeah.
Whatever is relatively available to you guys, I would stick with that. If you're not cleaning your track religiously, any form of urethane or rubber is going to be fine.
Yeah.
The big issue is at that speed, the magnets are going to let go way quicker than the tires.
Yeah.
So as long as the guys, pick a tire that everybody likes and wants and has, and at least the tires will be equal. But with that much downforce, the tires are the least issue in terms of performance on the whole.
Yeah, yeah. No worries. Hopefully I can talk them into running no mag at some stage.
Yeah, actually saying that urethanes are probably more durable when you're running high downforce than your rubber, aren't they?
I mean, silicone is going to be your longest lasting, but let's not go there.
No.
So on tires, Martin, aren't you the tire truer guy? Don't you have like a buttload of tire truers?
No, I've just got two. I've got the NSR, the one that looks like a big spinning wheel. That's a fabulous bit of kit. And I tried to beat it with the Scale Auto one because I was thinking I could do two tires at the same time and get them exactly the same diameter. Unfortunately, it takes too much juice to do that. It's not up to it. So what I'm doing now is I'm using the Scale Auto to take like 2 or 3 mil off, and then I'm using the NSR to get them, 0.2 of a mil or whatever.
So you're probably not the one who asked this question, or maybe you were, and hopefully there's a Scale Auto tire truer expert here.
Yeah, it was me who asked the question.
It was. So how the blimmin' flip do you get a Scale Auto tire truer to run with the shaft parallel to the drum? Does anybody know?
I found out in the end what it was. The receiving bearing, so the far end bearing, is ever so slightly in an eccentric mount, so you have to adjust 2 screws, and I don't think it's worth the hassle to try and get, you know, to try and get the two tires on at the same time and get exactly the same diameter. And then, you know, it draws so much current that you're just making a mess of the tires. So I just bit the bullet. I do one at a time. It's okay.
So that's what that question was about, is trying to get two tires on there and then perfectly parallel so that it's.
Yeah, so I wasn't getting any towing, or I wasn't getting one slightly askew, and I got there in the end. It's not ideal, and I wasted some money, but I've got a guy who wants to buy it off me. I might just pass it on.
There you go. Oh, great. Here,
I hope he's not watching this.
No. He's in a club. He's in a club where a load of the guys have got it. Is it? Oh God. The guy who just started coming to Wales and West, Sean, is it Graham Walker, I think his name is?
Oh, Graham, yeah, I know him.
Because a lot of his mates have got them, and Graham, you know, they sell them at 30 quid less than the new price. Mine's hardly used, so it's a bargain for the guy who wants it.
I think you should just stick with a hoodie. The best investment I did.
Definitely.
Yeah.
It was the
A
scale.
hoodie tire thrower. Yeah, I think Pendle's out of stock again, aren't they?
Everyone is.
Yeah. You know, the best investment I did. Expensive investment, but it's one of the better ones.
It's one of those things, Sean. You're going to get your money's worth. It's going to last.
Yeah. It is a dark art, mind you. It took me several years to get my tyres right, but once you figured it out, but I'll tell you what helped me out a lot was on Pendle website he's Nick. He wrote a report, didn't he, on the blog, on the Pendle website. He's gone down on blog. He is a bit on tyre throwing, and I followed that and started doing what they said, and I found it's come to. I found it much easier now.
Yeah, if Nick was a magician, he'd be thrown out the magic circle for doing that.
Well, there is a way to go about setting up at least some of the truers. Something that I learned a while back. I have a machine that I bought from Professor Motor probably 20 or 25 years ago. It's similar to some that are being made now. This is a German machine, a Reifenschiefen machine, which basically did two tires at once, had a pair of V-shaped carriers that carried the axle, and you put the wheel and a double wheel and tire assembly on it. It used a drive pulley, or a driven pulley, which had a slot and a set screw in it, so you could use it with, for example, already set up stock Scale Electric or whoever's wheel setups where you don't want to pull them off the axle because then you'd ruin them. And I found out after a while that it had started to get, probably from wear, a little bit out of whack. I found, number one, a way to get it back into shape, and number two, a way to keep that from happening. It's impossible, at least in my mind, to make those kind of adjustments by measuring or gauging the tires themselves, because trying to get the same load on your caliper or whatever you're using as you move from tire to tire is a fool's errand. So what I did is I simply put a bare axle in the machine, and I happen to have a couple of reasonably precise gauge blocks around. Put a gauge block at either end on the surface and lowered the machine down, and using a feeler gauge, simply fiddled and filed with the V's until I got the axle to sit perfectly evenly across the gauge blocks. Then I made a change in the way that I did things. Instead of running the axle in these aluminum V's, I slipped just a couple of bearings over my test axle, and they slot into the V, so you don't have the steel on aluminum wear consideration. And I now routinely get my tires, so far as I can tell, to the same diameter, with the caveat that, again, measuring tires with a caliper or something like that is a bit of an iffy proposition.
Yeah. I'm actually just going to run upstairs and grab the scale order one. I just want to show you one of the main problems I had with it, so I'll be back in 2 seconds.
That tire true you was on about, that's I think they make them in the States. I think that's
Tire.
Tire razor.
Yeah, that's the kind that I.
There's another one what made in Australia many years ago, and I've got that one. I can't remember what it's called now.
Area 3.
Area 51.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
I believe the Tire Razor and the Area 3 are very, very similar.
Yeah.
You're basically inspired by the one that you're talking about. I think.
And Andy Smith, Professor Motors Tire Tour was an exact copy of the Tire Razor Area 3.
Yeah, they all have their own little idiosyncrasies. One of the nice things about the Tire Razor is that the way that it's designed to hold the carriage that holds your axle is 2 bolts, and they can be very slightly tweaked. So if you're bringing it down and one wheel is touching the sanding block before the other one, then you tweak those bolts a little bit to straighten it out. Probably not as precise as what you were doing, but it's good enough for me.
You know, on the Tire Razor, it has that little lip on the front where the sanding block slides.
Yeah.
I filed that off so I can move the sanding block back and forth as well. So you're not just using that one little strip of stuff.
That's not a bad idea.
It's a good idea.
Yeah, it just
I made
uses the
when I bought my Aerial 3, I bought it from Pendle at the same time as I bought my hoodie, and the Aerial 3 had quite a few bits missing, i.e. the sanding block and a pulley. Nick Kurzweil had asked him to make me a pulley, and he made me one. And the sanding block, I just got a bit of aluminum from work, or aluminium as we call it, and just modified that. And it's a bit thinner, and like you say, it just goes sideways as well as backwards and forwards. And I've used that several times, but I still prefer the hoodie.
Well, yeah, here's the Scale Auto. It's it comes in a nice little box. It's a quality bit of kit. It's got a dust catcher underneath. But the biggest problem, what I was trying to get is how to get these 2 guys, which are the travel stops, equal. They go against, it's difficult to show you. They sort of go against the chassis in there, both sides. So I ended up just counting the threads, and just backing them off. And it's a pain in the arse because it's a 4mm hex head. And so I ended up counting threads. So I got that spot on. But the biggest problem I actually had is, this is the travel adjuster. So you're winding the axle closer and further away. This wasn't actually put on correctly. So I had to take it off. Thank God there's an Allen head in there. Took it off. I put a little shim between the chassis and the wheel, and then I got it perfectly flat. So now what happens is it moves evenly inwards and outwards. And that was the biggest problem. It was going in okay, but it wasn't coming back correctly. So that's why I was getting askew. But again, there's still not oomph in this motor. I might upgrade the motor, so just draw a few more amps and maybe turn 2 tires, or maybe I'll just stick with it as it is. But yeah,
use an RC motor, Martin.
Say again, mate?
Use an RC motor.
Yeah, I could do, yeah.
Because that's mainly what's in the hoodies and my Aerial 3 are like RC motors.
It's an RC 550.
Yeah,
Sorry,
and you can get some high-powered ones.
Yeah.
I'll have a little look. Thanks, Sean. Good tip.
Yeah.
That's just it. And it now works reasonably well, Greg. So thanks for asking the question.
I made a useful accessory to mine. At least I find it useful. It came with a flat aluminum plate onto which you fasten the abrasive. The plate has a slit partway through the middle to clear the driven pulley. I machined a new one. Sure, I did it out of plastic, which has the same slit, but instead of being flat, it has 2 wells on each side, into which I put individual pieces of wet or dry paper, so that after grinding, with a typical fairly coarse abrasive down to about the size I want, I can put this plate in the machine with a bit of water in the well and a wet or dry paper, and get a very, very smooth finish on the tire, which I find does make a difference. at least in my experience, the urethane tires, while they may not be perfectly round in terms of adhesion, are best when they come from a mold with essentially a very nearly a polished finish on them. Roughing them up is rather like putting tread on a regular tire as opposed to a slick. You lose a bit of that adhesion. You can get most of it back with a 600 then 1000 grit paper running in water. It's messy.
You know, one of the things we do, Alan, with the slot and the NSR sticky ties is we get a microfiber cloth, put a little bit of like 3-in-1 oil on it. We just, the very last thing we do on the tire true is just polish the surface.
Yeah.
And it brings, as you say, takes those imperfections out, and it takes the, particularly with the scale auto, it can leave little grooves. You can almost see a tread. So yeah, just a microfiber, a little bit of 3-in-1, and as soon as your fingertip gets too hot, it's just about getting right.
I'll have to try that. That's very good.
Yeah, it's also handy for profiling the edges so you don't get the bite. You know, when you want to chamfer the edge a tiddly bit, it really helps.
I must confess I have this built-in aversion to putting oil on tires, and this stems from long ago, my 1-to-1 days, when you sure as hell didn't want to come into a corner and see that red and yellow flag up.
It really is counterintuitive, isn't it?
Yeah.
This is the this bit of kit here I've got here. I don't know if you can see it. John's got one. Martin's got one as well. I bought this off a company called SV Works.
Ad.
Yeah.
Oh, you had? Bits.
Sorry.
Yeah, mine shattered.
I find it very, very useful tool, and it actually gets up the grip of the tyres. If you've got tyres which are not very grippy, I'll see if you can see it there. If you've got tyres which are not very grippy, just put them together and you touch them. You touch the tyres like they're just kissing, then set the motor off, and they run both tyres, and you just leave them for about 5 minutes, and then dry them off, and you'll be surprised how much extra grip you get with them. I find it the last set of tyres I used were the polycarb F1 tyres, and I was surprising how much extra grip I got out of it. And it really works pretty good, and it only, what, 20 euros?
Isn't something like that integrated into the NSR tire truer?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah,
you got the one side, you've got the spinning wheel, and on the other side, you've got a capstan where you just got a shaft going through, so you can run the two together. And yeah, it works. But this is really handy to take to a race meet if if all of a sudden you got to get a new pair of tires and they're not oiled up or they're not soft enough. This thing what I did, I'm pointing to my screen. Yeah, this is stupid. The slide-in part, Sean, I pulled the tires together too tight.
Yeah.
And I shattered the screw mounts went.
I was quite impressed with it, on considering how much I paid. Yeah. It was 20 euros because Steve from SV Works came over for a race meeting, and I had him bring one over, so I didn't even have to bother with postage, which was helpful. And
Steve,
yeah, and I was very impressed with it. I'll see you use it once, Martin, and I'll try one of them. And like Martin says, it fits in your pit box it's quite small and dinky. So it's a handy thing to have. Just connect it to a 9-volt battery and you're away.
Where did that come from again?
Oh, this particular one, with a company called SV Works. It's are they Belgian?
Shapeways, Alan.
Shapeways.
Yeah. He's on Shapeways. Just as Sean said, just type in SV Works. As I say, I've got one. I've used it. I haven't used it that much, but as Sean says, for what it does, it's like a similar system to the tyre saucer, isn't it? Where it's on a concentric cam, and obviously you put your axle in a thing, and it swivels while it's got it's in like a dish of 3-in-1 oil, NSR, whatever brew you fancy putting in there. It does a similar system, and as Sean was saying, and Martin, pop it in your pit box. You need another set of tyres. Get them going, and then try and, last couple of practice sessions, see if they're working better than your other ones. Because at the end of the day, most of it's about grip, isn't it? And if you can find a nicer set of tyres to run, you tend to have a better morning, afternoon's racing, don't you?
I mean, you can make them.
I'll put the link up, Sean.
Out of, sorry, yeah, you can make them out of just a flotted pod and a bit of wood and stuff like that. Like I have seen people make them. I think Kev's got one, haven't you? Yeah.
I love making stuff out of crap, basically. So, I've got some PCB board, which it's already pre-soldered. I just got a pack of it. I got an old fly motor mount and a gear, an old RC bearing, it's off a 12th, and a brass bush. So I put a couple of battery connectors basically there, and then I put a tire in on here, a tire on this one,
yeah,
a tire on that one, connect it up, and just the weight holds the two tires together, and I just leave it trundling away with a blob of oil on it, and that's cost me now.
Yeah.
And then we're talking about polishing tires. I've got one of my early scratch builds out of brass and wire, and I just cobbled something together, put an old motor in it. I put a wheel on either side, connected up to the power again, and polish both the tires on a really fine oil stone with water, and they go really, really shiny.
Martin, do you ever use, for polishing, have you tried using shellite?
No, I haven't actually.
Try that.
Okay, that's, I'll have a little look at that.
Instead of your, so you do your final cuts on your NSRs, you're going to find basically the edges, the sidewalls are, especially if you're using ultras, the sidewalls are going to be all ratty right at the profile edge. And then before you do anything else, just take a bit of shellite on your microfiber cloth and do exactly the same thing you did with the oil. The shellite, you'll be amazed how much of the little balling it will take off the tire and clean it up. And if you really want to trust me on this, you can use your fingernail on the tire as the tire is rotating in the tire truer, and just use fingernail pressure to scour off a bunch of those ugly bits. Once you've done that, then you do your normal oiling process.
Okay, so it's
sorry,
just
what is shellite? I don't know what that is. Sorry.
it comes up as white spirit.
Yeah.
Or Coleman fuel is the other name it's come up with.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, don't go nuts with it. You don't want to be, you're not going to soak these in the shellite, because shellite will, blister and expand the tires like crazy. But it's a really nice way to certainly profile the sidewalls of the tire and get rid of that rough, which you get sometimes. I mean, I've done, 20% of the ultras that I do, the sidewalls end up just looking like crap when you're initially done with them. But I mean, once you spend a bit of time on them, you can make them look like Formula One qualifying tires, for God's sake. They're nice and shiny. And between heats, Sean, that little gizmo that you've got, do you use that between heats, or do you use that sort of before the meeting or after the meeting or whatever?
I tend to use it more at home. It's not very often I use it during heats. It's usually you find, them tyres are not got much grip left in them.
Okay.
I tend to bung them on at home, put them on at home, sorry, and just leave them, what we call 3-in-1, which is like just cheap oil.
Yeah.
And I'll leave that running for about 5-10 minutes, and usually it brings them back to life.
Oh, yeah.
If you've got a set, if you've had a set of tyres which you think, well, they're not running very well on this surface, you switch to another set of tyres, and I tend to find it brings them back to life. So you're not too, so you haven't got to rip the old tyres off and put a new set on and then start all over again with them.
And what do you guys typically do between heats? Are you allowed to touch your tires, or you just pick the car off the track and switch lanes?
It tends to be tape them. Just run them over tape.
Yeah.
Tape and lighter fluid.
Okay. I mean, if you can use lighter fluid on them between heats.
Yeah, it just doesn't want to go on the track when they're wet. They don't. If you're racing, they get a bit grumpy if they're wet.
Yeah, as long as the tires are dry when they go back on the track, like they're normally pretty good.
Yeah. If you want something that'll work super duper fast in between heats, tea tree oil.
Yeah, you're the second person to say that, Kevin. Yeah, interesting.
It's got wintergreen in it.
That's what I was waiting for. Wintergreen, yeah.
Wintergreen, oil of wintergreen. Yeah, that's old school right there.
No, it's more banned than a banned thing in our clubs.
When I moved over from the RC, we would use Paragon ground effects for foam tires on. This is on 12th scale on carpet, and that's got wintergreen in it, and it works great on slot cars, but everybody could smell it. So I just use a mixture. My favourite mixtures: NSR oil and lighter fluid in a 50-50 mix. I just mix in a little bottle.
I'd love to know what NSR oil is, because it's so expensive, and it's just some sort of shit oil.
Or it's just motor oil.
You should, if you know any tech guys, get them to run it through a lab. I can tell you very, very definitely, if you buy a bottle of 3-in-1 oil, you're right there.
Yeah, I find 3-in-1 just spot on. It's not very expensive, and you get quite a lot for what you're paying for. And
it's cheap as chips, isn't it?
And it just tends to work instead of like all these like super duper concoctions. Just stick with 3-in-1.
It's all bloody oil.
Yeah.
If
it's got blood in it, you've done something wrong.
That's it. When Noviello first came out with the oil years ago, we had a bunch of another Italian guy, Ernie Mazzetti, I've known Ernie for years, and we've grown up together and stuff. He was a good buddy with Noviello's, and talked to him and said, "What is this stuff?" And he said, "Well, you're paying 25 cents for what's in the bottle, and you're paying $4.50 for the NSR logo on the label and the little applicator on the outside of the stuff."
Sounds right.
I mean, knock yourself out, use it, go crazy. It's no bloody different. You can use trombone oil, machine oil, and that's why lighter fluid works well, because the base of lighter fluid is limonene oil, which is lighter fluid's oil. It's just a very thin based oil. So, again, you can use lemon juice or peanut butter or raspberry jam or like whatever you think works. You go right ahead and use that.
Having done this for most of my working life, I think they call it marketing.
Well,
Hey, Chris, that's great tips. Thank you very much.
This stuff's okay. Can't get it now, though.
Yeah, that's the guy from North London, isn't it?
Yeah, slot cards. That's the green stuff. I've tried all of them, but the green stuff, it's very like what we used to use in the early days in the RC days, which I got a bottle of. It's called Tiac, which was a pinch roller, the tape pinch roller reviving.
Yeah, well, you would have to. That's right. In recording studios, you would actually use something like that to keep the rubber.
Keep the heads.
Yeah, that's right.
Carcinogenic, though.
What isn't?
That stuff, Kevin, is that Slot Cartel?
That's
it.
Yeah, he's good at marketing.
Stuff. But I found that 3-in-1 oil, put it on 24 hours before you're going to use the car, and then it'll probably last a couple of races.
Yeah.
The guys that turn up on race night and then put oil on the tyres, they've completely wasted the time.
Yeah.
It's got to have time to work.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Slot Cartel was finished off by a nasty divorce, wasn't he?
I don't know.
Yeah, the poor guy. He had to sell all his gear. It was really unfortunate. But yeah, the green one, that's interesting. One of the guys in Molesey, it's a shame Alan's not on tonight, because Alan would tell us, not Molesey, sorry. Where's the one where they do the dodgy raffles, John?
No, Watford.
No, it's the other one. Anyway, there's a club in North London where I think one of the guys will still have the stock for Slot Cartel's old stock.
He used a lot of koala claws in it.
Well, we
which
have
is eucalyptus oil, which you find in tea tree oil.
John, you're miming, mate. What are you miming?
Can you hear me? Oh,
no, John Underwood was miming something then.
You're muted, John.
Right. Yes, the koala claws are is a good product. I got some from AB Slot, I think. One of the Brisker suppliers. Especially on some of the old scale electric tires, obviously go hard, fly, stuff like that. Sometimes the fly ones just want junking. Obviously 20 years old and they always come out of them, so you have to replace those. But some of the older tires, or even some harder tires, a couple of drops of the koala claws on it, and if you keep it straight out the corners, you'll probably get really good grip for half the race, and hopefully you've pulled out enough of the lead just to hold off for the next sort of 6-10 laps, whatever it happens to be. But I've used various lotions and potions. I think I've tried everything that's sort of really available. The other ones I'm trying to think is PRS. Tommaso, is it Miloni, owns PRS over in Italy. He's got some stuff. It's very similar to screen wash. And you sort of, I sniffed it. It smells like screen wash. So I went in the garage and I've got some screen wash in it. It's the same stuff. So, screen wash the other day, I can't think where we were.
It was that blue MB Slot, Blue Jizz as it was known over here.
Tire Magic.
That's screen wash.
Yeah, because Tire Magic, same thing. I've got some here. It's probably 4 foot from me, Martin. I've got the pink one of Dale's lotions and potions, which I keep in the box. There's a bottle of koala claws. Obviously, I've got petrol in there. I use Zippo, but and obviously there's a tube or a tub of NSR. But as I say, you can do all you want to tires. It's your finger, mate. That's that in your brain. It's not just about the tires. If you've got a car and it's not got the ultra grip, just keep it in the slot. Try, don't push it. Keep it in the slot. You'll make up time. But that's
just let everybody else make the mistakes and keep going round.
Yeah.
Find your edge and drive a couple of percent slower. That way you don't lose 5 seconds every time you do slot and spend 50 laps trying to catch it back up.
That's it.
Actually, I find the best thing for making a tyre stick, if we won't go down our club on a Tuesday night and the cleaners haven't cleaned the floor since Saturday night's party, the leftover dried lager on the floor really makes your tyre stick. Don't drop it on its roof, because when it turns over, the marshals won't be able to pick it up.
Oh, I remember them days. Sticky
I've been to a few clubs where it's a bit like that as well. That's another story.
A bit of analogy to the whole importance of driving. I played golf through college, and we were always tinkering with shafts. I might have told you guys this before. We're always tinkering with shafts and grip sizes and lead and tape and weights and sole grinds and all the rest of the stuff. And, our coach used to come along and watch us, and he'd invariably say, you know what, it's still the same idiot at the end of the club. So, it's, at our clubs, the guys always, here, I worked in a couple of the commercial tracks I'm in, they always say, well, I need you to tune up my car so it goes 0.3 of a second a lap quicker. And I say, I can't do that. I can't, that is a huge amount of gain. So I would take their car and drive their car, and I'd be 0.4 of a second quicker than they were. So I said, I can't, you know, the biggest tuning element is either your right hand or your left hand. That is by far the biggest difference on the whole thing. And, you know, the tires, you know, if you look and you say, you know, Slot Cartel had this and this guy has this, and, you know, I'm sure most of those guys are not chemical engineers.
No.
So they probably went into the garage and found some stuff and added a bit of food color to it and put it in the magic bottle, and everybody buys it. So.
And that's something that hasn't changed since this hobby started. That's, remember the rust coat? That was just shellac in a small bottle.
Well, I worked at a commercial track when I was about 12 or 13. And this was when all of the HO was big, but we weren't racing HO, we were racing 32nd, 24 scale stuff. But Aurora, I don't know if any of you guys remember, Aurora used to make this red oil in a little bottle with a little cap on it. It was just red oil. So I would take this and put a couple of drops into some castor oil, put a cap on the thing, and we labeled this stuff in the commercial raceway as Chris's secret tire additive. And Christ, we sold a ton of the crap. It was just dyed castor oil. No, but you know, it was all the marketing stuff, and you know.
That was the 3/10, the psychological edge.
Well, it's, you know, I raced wing cars for years, and, you know, one of the guys would win a race and he would have a purple anodized guide nut, right? Which is no different than the gold anodized guide nuts, right? But next race, we're going to be selling a lot of purple anodized guide nuts, right? So it's the same old thing.
Yeah, well, that's a good analogy because it does come down to nuts.
It does.
I mean, we've taken a different approach at our club. I guess because we either insist on running stock rubber tyres to which you're allowed to use 3-in-1, or you use urethanes, which you can't treat at all. I think in some ways, if you start getting into this serious levels of tuning and gunk and so on, it actually brings a level of secrecy and competitiveness to it that isn't healthy for some clubs. Because we race digital and on quite a technical track, our cars are going quite slow. So we don't even use tyre. There's one guy who used tyre truers, and his car's never faster than anybody else's. I tend to true by hand and by ear and by feel. But the speeds we're going around digital tracks, it's more about strategy and tactics. As long as you've got clean tyres that are round and you put a little bit of oil on if they're rubber, it's more down to the tactics and the headology. And, you know, I agree with John, it's your right finger contributes most. I think we find you get more out of running your motor in than putting gunk on your tyres. As long as your tyres are round and true. And I trust the guys not to put gunk on. If one of them suddenly gets a lot quicker, then we might ask them what they're putting on their tyres. But I think there's a degree of trust in the club that I guess because we don't award trophies, we keep championship points, but at the end of the year we go out for curry. We don't give anybody a cup. Yeah, and it's down to how competitive you want to be, I guess. But because of the speeds we're travelling on plastic track, we don't have the need to put that law of diminishing returns to the test to see if you can spend another £100 to get an extra half of a hundredth off your lap time. But it's horses for courses, I guess, isn't it? I enjoy the strategy and the camaraderie, and I enjoy the racing. But if it became a test of who's got the biggest wallet, it becomes less fun then.
Yeah, it's each to their own, Richard. All I would say is last year in the Wales and West in the GTs on Ninko, yeah, I ran a Mosler with a blue chassis and a bounce lock orange motor. Rear tyre wise, 16mm NSR solid hubs with handout Planet 32s on them. Didn't true them, I just trued them up on a Ninko track because that's what you have to do. Give it 20 to 50 laps, they're true. They're not glued, no treatment. And I think I was, well, definitely top 5 last year.
Yeah.
With hand-out tyres. Basically, I just stuck them on. Obviously, I changed them, a bit like E1s. They don't last. Probably get 2 decent Sundays racing on them. So, 15, 20 minutes practice, scrub them up. And then you're going to have a, 18, 20-minute race over 4, 6 lanes, whatever it's going to be. Probably get 2 meetings out of them. And as I say, I just used Planet 32s, unglued, untreed.
Yep.
I agree with you there, John.
I
used them earlier this year at Martin's place.
Yeah.
And I found they worked very well on Minco truck plastic.
Yeah, and I think they're the cheapest tyres we use in a year, aren't they? They're like £4 for 4.
Yeah.
And
as I say, handouts, I'll throw this one out. This will raise a few eyebrows. Even on our wood tracks in this country, in the UK, I think that all wood-based tracks ought to be handout tyres. You can't glue them on. If you want to true them.
I've said it before. That would be the only thing that would get me back interested in the National GT3 Championship.
Yeah.
Is if they went to handout tyres.
Yeah, I think we have one of the there's a commercial track, or actually it's starting up again in Toronto, and urethanes work great on the track. And I approached one of the urethane manufacturers in North America to ask him if he could put a little colored dot into the tread of the tire. So if you look from the outside of the car, you can't see a bloody thing, and there's a little green or yellow dot in the tire. So when I tech the cars, I spin the back end. If I see 2 yellow, blue, whatever the color of the hell the dots we put in that race, if I see 2 colored dots in, you're in. It's good.
Yeah, at the Wales and West Championship that I helped do the Park Ferme, I always take a selection of magic pens.
Well,
I mark everyone's tyres. They don't know about it, so I can see who's fiddling about.
I make tyres for 2 of our classes, because I use the same batch of urethane, make the tyres, put them all in a bag. Everybody draws a pair of tyres out, and I get whatever's left. So I've got the same compound as everybody else, so they're not cheating. And that works well because it's down to how well you prep the rest of your car and how you drive it. If you take tyres out of the equation, there's a lot less suspicion.
Well, I mean, we had, I was in a GT3 proxy, which is basically an open, anything you want to do, any motor, any chassis, scratch build, plastic, whatever you want to do. If you took the top 6 cars in their finishing positions and switched the tires from number 6 to number 1, et cetera, they would all they would all move around. So it was basically down to the tires. And unfortunately, with the way that everybody makes their tires, I mean, NSR makes their tires in such small bloody batches. They're like cookies. So today's cookies,
everyone's different.
Well, you think you put as much sugar as baking soda and oatmeal, and you're almost positive you did. But the temperature was different that day. The humidity was different that day, and you weren't quite. So, I mean, I typically, on a big race, I'll do maybe 8 to 10 sets of tires, glued on, trued, as close as I can make the bloody things, put them on the car, and there's a 1/10 to 2/10 difference just in like the magic set of tires versus the non-magic set of tires. Now, I don't mind doing that. It costs obviously money to do 10 sets of tires and 10 sets of wheels and all the rest of the stuff. But I agree with you guys who say it's not good for the hobby. There's a bunch of guys who are going, I don't want to do this. I can't afford it. I don't have the time. I don't have the ability, blah, 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 blah. And at the end of the day, if we were all going around a 1/10 of a second slower, who cares? It's the competition that's important, not the final 100. I mean, it is important, but you know what I mean. So I agree with you, Nick. There's some things that you just go, no, let's return to normalcy before. When I was a kid, I was sponsored by an armature manufacturer called Potential Kinetics, PK armatures. And his armatures held all kinds of world record lap times, and they were great armatures. And I and the other guys on the team would get the best armatures out of the 200 that were ever, put together and assembled and stuff like that. So it became an unobtainium race, which really pissed a lot of guys off, turned a lot of guys away from the hobby, and did a whole bunch of other things. So I think we got to be careful going forward. How much faster do you need to go? If you really want to go fast, and I mean, I've argued with some, I do not like taking stock interiors out of the cars for putting Lexan interiors. And the guys go, well, they're faster. And I go, okay, fine. Let's use Lexan bodies. They're really fast. Where do you end up on this whole thing? So anyway, I'm not going to rant anymore because I could rant on for ages on this thing.
And that seems like a good note to end on. We have come to our 2-hour mark pretty much. So I think I'm going to go ahead and hit stop on the recording, and you guys can keep chatting as long as you like. Everybody watching on the internet, come next time and chat longer if you want to. But for now, it's a bye-bye.